Hi, how are you? This is Don. We're going to look at conversation number 1 and conversation number 2 on our big handouts that have color where A and B are talking. And remember, when you see green, that means you can change some words. So this is conversation number 1, weekend plans. And when A is talking, I will say, A says, when B is talking, I will say, B says, and remember, means something. Okay, so this is number 1, weekend plans. We look on the left side. Number 1 on the left side, A says, what are your plans for the weekend? B says, nothing special, or I don't have any plans, or I'm not sure yet, or I don't know. B says, A says, oh, okay. B says, how about you? Or what about you? Or and you? In the middle, number 1, A says, what are you going to do this weekend? B says, I'm going to stay home because I'm sick. A says, I'm sorry to hear that. B says, thanks. How about you? Or what about you? Or and you? And A will talk about A, of course. All right, on the right side, A says, what are you up to this weekend? Remember, what are your plans for the weekend? What are you going to do this weekend? And what are you up to this weekend are the same. So on the right side, number 1, A says, what are you up to this weekend? B says, I'm going to have a picnic. A says, nice, or that sounds fun. B says, how about you? Or what about you? Or and you? Okay, now for conversation number 2, we have part 1 and part 2. Okay, so conversation number 2, part 1. Okay, so this is how are you? And this is part 1. Here we go. Part 1, you can ask these questions every day. And this one is how are you? Okay, so conversation number 2, part 1. On the left side, number 1, A says, how are you? B says, I'm okay, or not too bad. A says, oh, okay. Why? B says, because, how about you? Or how are you? A says, I'm, okay, in the middle, remember how are you and how are you doing and how's it going are the same. Same meaning. So in the middle, number 1, A says, how are you doing? B says, I'm fine. A says, I'm glad to hear that. B says, how about you? Or how are you? A says, I'm, okay, on the right side, number 1, A says, how's it going? B says, I'm having a bad day. A says, I'm sorry to hear that. Why? B says, because I have a headache and my son is sick. How about you? A says, I'm, okay, now conversation number 2, part 2. Conversation number 2, part 2. In this one, maybe B was sick recently, or maybe B was tired recently, or maybe B was sad recently. Recently means maybe yesterday, maybe last week, okay? So on the left side, number 1, A says, how do you feel today? B says, I feel so-so. A says, I'm sorry to hear that. Why? B says, because I'm tired. How about you? A says, I feel, Remember, when it's green, you can change the words. In the middle, number 1, A says, how do you feel today? B says, I feel great. A says, I'm glad to hear that. Why? B says, because it's sunny today. How about you? A says, I feel. Okay, on the right side, number 1 says, how are you feeling today? B says, I feel better than yesterday. A says, I'm glad to hear that. Why? B says, because my cold is better. How about you? A says, I feel. Okay, that's all for conversation number 1 and conversation number 2. I'll have more in a different video. Thank you.